Hi everyone, my name is Kaylee, and I'm going to be making this video to discuss and reflect on my process of internalization and annotating Wit and Wisdom Module 1, Lesson 1. I'm going to talk about how I approached it as a teacher, how I annotated the curriculum, the strengths and challenges of my lesson design, and what I learned from the process. When I approached the lesson, I tried to read it through the lens of a teacher that's preparing to teach it, rather than just acting as if I'm the student that's about to complete the assignment and making sure it makes sense. When I first read through the lesson, I did it without annotating so I could understand the lesson's purpose and the learning goals and how it fit into the module. And on my second read, I paid close attention to the pacing of the material, and I noticed how it was very structured and it had clear time frames and routines which help guide attention to instruction. And I also feel that the fast-paced change-ups were just going to be dependent on students' needs. I also noticed that students are expected to engage in multiple tasks, including in discussions, which is really good for students no matter what, because they're able to see what the other students say and understand other people's thought processes and possibly be able to not change their mind but see it from a different perspective. I read it through and I was able to see how they would be able to do it with just reading the text, and also through how they could go about doing writing responses. This showed me the intention of the lesson and how internalization in the process of doing this is to balance the teacher's guidance and how the work can be more student-centered. For my annotations, I used a color-based code system so that I could be organized with how I went about highlighting and annotating the text. And for example, I used the color green whenever I was marking key teacher instructional periods, like how we would go through prompts, questions, and how I would go about modeling. I used another color, blue, so that I would be able to highlight the student expectations, including the goals of discussion times and writing tasks, along with comprehension checks. So I used that color to make sure that I annotated it to where I knew that those were specifically what the students would have to do, not the teacher. And then my last color, I used pink so that I could, I used pink so that I could mark down areas that need to be slowed down for instruction, and so that we could have a clearly directed lesson and to provide additional support for the students in that section. Color coding this and doing the annotations this way in this style allowed me to understand what areas might be hard for the students, what the students needed to do, what activities they needed to do, and what I, as the teacher, would need to do. One major strength of this lesson is the fact that it aligns to instruction, the text, and the students' needs and their outcomes of how they will go about these activities that we do. A great thing about this lesson is it builds background knowledge and it makes the student think. Critical thinking is super important with any age group, solely because even if they have to think harder than they expected they would need to do, it allows them to go beyond their normal effort of thinking, oh, I don't know the answer. It makes them think, and it makes them think critically. Another strength of this lesson is it's really great for new teachers. I've heard Wit and Wisdom mentioned prior to this class before, and I know several of my teachers in high school, specifically an AP Lang teacher I had, she used something of this format for us in our class, and it forced us to have group discussion, and it allowed us to see different outlooks and different point of views and see what different people took away from the text. One of the potential weaknesses of this lesson is the pacing of it. If a teacher were to attack this and go full throttle on it, it could be too fast moving for the students to understand, because wit and wisdom is a harder lesson if you don't pay more attention to it and you don't know your students. So I believe it would depend on what age group and what your class's ability to stay on task and have critical thinking discussions, and how the students' reading habits would be. So, a really big thing of this that would impact a teacher and the students the most is the pacing, due to how it can seem like too much all at one time. But again, it would definitely have to be tweaked and changed up a little bit or slowed down for the specific classroom students' needs. When it comes to insights and takeaways for this portion of the video, I just want to make it very clear that this curriculum and the planning, it's so straight to the point. The learning goals are so clearly put out, and it's very, very structured. With knowing what the students were supposed to know at the end of the lesson was a really great thing, because you're going to be able to pace out when will they get to that finish line that is outlined in this. The most challenging part about this was how many times I went through and had to reread certain sections, because even I was having a hard time keeping up on some of the points. But besides that, I believe the hardest thing would be juggling the timing of the lessons, the materials, the prompts for the discussions that the group of students will end up having, and how I can kind of work the students to have the correct responses. So how they would answer the discussion prompts was a really big stressor. But all in all, annotating it helped me slow it down and fully process it myself. That's why I'm really glad the color coding was promoted for this, because again, I was able to section out what was for specifically the teacher or myself, the students, and how to go about the pacing of it all. In conclusion, I think, again, this was a really great lesson, and knowing your classroom will be your greatest help with this lesson, because you will know exactly the pacing, how your students should respond, and how to have your students engage where it feels more comfortable, rather than making them feel stressed out about not knowing the answer. But yeah, thank you for watching.